You're listening to Medscape's In Discussion series on psoriasis, a podcast where thought leaders and clinical experts share their diverse insights and practical ideas for optimizing patient care. This series is hosted by Dr. Stephen R. Feldman, Professor of Dermatology, Pathology, and Social Sciences and Health Policy at Wake Forest University School of Medicine in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Relevant disclosures can be found with the episode show notes on Medscape.com or the Medscape app. The topics and discussions are planned, produced, and reviewed independently of advertisers. This podcast is intended only for you as healthcare professionals.
Welcome to Medscape In Discussion Psoriasis. I'm your host, Dr. Steve Feldman. This is the first episode of our second season, and today we'll focus on advocacy for people with psoriasis. Patients with psoriasis need more than just the right diagnosis and the right treatment. They need to be educated about their options. They need to know how to manage the day-to-day impact of the disease, how to navigate interpersonal and social impacts, and get access to care, not just to drugs, but to doctors who know how and want to help. There's one organization that's helping psoriasis patients more than any other. To unpack what's been happening in the legislative, education, and patient arenas, we've invited a lawyer and patients' rights advocate who leads the largest psoriatic disease support and research nonprofit organization in the world. In the last decade, our guest and the National Psoriasis Foundation that she leads have empowered people with psoriatic disease to share their unique challenges with policymakers, paving the way for meaningful changes, including improving access to physician experts on psoriasis and more than 40 state laws opening up access to treatment. It's my great pleasure to welcome the president and CEO of the National Psoriasis Foundation, Leah Howard.
Thank you, Steve. I'm so excited to be here today and really excited to share with your Medscape listeners all about the work that the National Psoriasis Foundation is doing to drive efforts to cure psoriatic disease and to improve the lives of people like me and others living with psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis today. So I'm going to share some practical tips and lots of stories, and just am really looking forward to today's conversation.
Oh, that sounds super. I wonder if I should just throw out my plan and let you start sharing some of those tips.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that. I think as we jump into this discussion, one of the things that really has me excited is the progress that's been made in our space and the better health outcomes that people that live with psoriasis today can achieve. So do you want to start there?
Yeah, that's great, because I started seeing psoriasis patients over 30 years ago. And the best treatment I had for people with horrible psoriasis was to give them some ultraviolet light and then cover them in a greasy tar ointment and wrap them with saran wrap. The patients weren't suffering just from their disease. They were suffering from the treatment. Now, the treatments we have are just like miracles.
There really have been so many advancements, and I think it's so amazing. I talk to so many individuals that live with psoriasis who share stories like you just shared. In fact, I was talking to a dermatologist just a week ago who was telling me their own personal story of a member of their family going through those treatments you described. And they were saying that today as an adult, that memory of that smell is still so imprinted in their own brain. And so I think it's that story of advancement is what has me and the National Psoriasis Foundation so excited to talk to people that live with psoriasis today, because we know that if they partner with a physician like you and other colleagues of yours, they can get to the place where their disease is well managed. In fact, I think many people don't know that they can get their skin clear or almost clear with the new treatments that are on the market today, and how exciting that is when they came from the place that you were just describing.
When I started, the National Psoriasis Foundation was so essential because we weren't getting people clear. The Psoriasis Foundation was so important, not just for people to know what the limited options were, but also how to manage the disease and the treatments and interactions with other people when their skin wasn't clear. Now that we have treatments that can get people clearer, as you say, almost completely clear, to the point they don't even bother treating the last few spots, has the role of the Psoriasis Foundation changed?
In some ways it has, but in other ways, I think we're still that organization that we were when we were founded in 1967. I think the founding story of the NPF is fascinating. There was a woman named Beverly Foster who was living with severe disease in Portland, Oregon, getting ready to celebrate her 30th birthday. And as a gift to her, her husband put an ad in the Oregonian, the local paper, 2 lines long, and it just basically said, to share mutual information, call this number. And in the first week, she received 100 calls. And what she discovered was that there were so many people that were like her, that were isolated and struggling and looking for help, looking for resources. And so over the next year, they met around kitchen tables and library conference rooms and became the Psoriasis Society of Oregon and then the National Psoriasis Foundation. So over the last 5.5 decades, our driving force has really been to connect our community and then push those advancements forward. And we've done that by focusing on 3 things: research, education, and advocacy. And I know we're going to talk about those here today. So I'm really excited to share with you what that work looks like today in 2023.
Super. So, my patients give me credit when I get their psoriasis well, and I'm like, I didn't develop the drug. The drug company did. You should be thanking them. But the Psoriasis Foundation, I think, has had strong efforts to promote getting drug companies interested in psoriasis and helping them get their clinical trials done. Is that one of the areas that the foundation's working in?
It is, absolutely. So when you think about our mission, it really is a twofold approach. One is driving those advancements in the disease. Obviously, we want to push toward a cure, so going after that as aggressively as possible. The other piece is recognizing that we need to improve health outcomes for people that live with the disease today. And that means bringing forward better treatments and then helping them to know what their options are, how to find physicians, and then how to partner with that physician to get the most appropriate treatment for them. We, over the last several years, have invested more than $30 million in research. So our annual budget this year has more than 1/3 of our funding going directly to research. And so in 2023, that means we'll spend about $3.5 million on grants and fellowships to researchers around the world who are doing work really at all levels of research, from the most basic discovery grants to translational awards that are really trying to bring forward those new treatments, those new understandings, and obviously the push toward a cure. The other piece of that, as you said, is partnering with those that are doing research and have bigger budgets than we have at the NPF. So that means the federal government, certainly NIH, is a big contributor to the research in our space. And we do a lot of work with a number of institutes at the NIH that are studying psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis, as well as pharmaceutical companies that we work to build relationships with and help them to connect with the community and make sure that our community knows about all those new therapies that are coming, and if they're interested in clinical trials, how to get involved. We actually have a clinical trial finder called My Studies, where someone can sign up on our website to get more information about clinical trials that are in their area that they might be a candidate for.
Yeah, I think we think of things like that primarily as helping people find a study, but it's probably equally valuable. Another way to think about it is that it's helping getting new drugs approved by making those studies more feasible.
Absolutely. And certainly from our perspective, we want to see as many different members of our community participate in studies as possible. We want to see studies that are reflective of the diversity of the psoriatic disease community. And so part of the work that we do is also to help different segments of our community know about the options that clinical trials present to access new therapies and to get their disease better treated.
Well said. I'm wondering if a great area of research would be to study what legislators and payers know about psoriasis and what kind of programs would be useful for addressing any gaps in their understanding of psoriasis. It seems like legislators and payers are key players in making sure patients have access to these wonderful treatments that we already have.
Those are two critical audiences for us, for sure. The approach that we take at the National Psoriasis Foundation is really to recognize that everyone else that's in the healthcare space, and that means obviously individuals that live with disease, their providers, their family members and caregivers, policymakers, payers, employers, they all have a role to play in improving the health both of our community and other chronic disease communities. And so we're really looking for those areas of partnership, looking to educate them and to help them to see how together we can better serve this community. So we have a lot of conversations with those two audiences in particular, policymakers and health insurance companies. I will tell you there's been significant improvement in their understanding over the last several decades. So I know certainly early on in the foundation's history, when they would talk to policymakers and try to start talking about psoriasis, the first thing that they would hear is cirrhosis. Is that involving the liver? So we've come beyond that, which is the good news story. At the same time, I think we've had really significant growth in our understanding of psoriasis as a chronic systemic immune-mediated disease. And a lot of the conversation that we have today with policymakers is really helping them to understand how this disease that presents on the skin may also be potentially causing health issues inside the body, things that we can't see in the cardiovascular system, or being a trigger for diabetes or mental health issues. And so really building that understanding of the importance of not just opening up access to therapies that can improve the skin, but also therapies that are going to address those other comorbid diseases, of which about a dozen are connected to psoriasis.
What are some of the key issues now that you're working with respect to legislation?
You know, it's a great question. I think our healthcare system faces a number of challenges. One of the biggest ones of those is cost. And certainly as the costs in our healthcare system have risen in the last several years, employers who are the ones that primarily pay for care are trying to find ways to bring the costs of providing health insurance to their employees down. And certainly those of us that are spending money on premiums want to see those dollars spent as wisely as possible and keep those dollars as low as they possibly can. And so I think our system is constantly trying to adjust to those pressures in the market and the demands that exist across the system. And what that has meant for individuals that live with psoriasis is they face a number of insurance challenges or hurdles when it comes to working with their provider to access therapies. So when you look at our space, we talked about the great advancements that we've had and the fact that you can get patients today clear or almost clear. Unfortunately, the reality is about half of our community isn't treating their disease as you would want them to treat them. What we say is as appropriately as they should. And what that means is kind of regardless of level of disease severity, they're either not treating at all or they're under treating their disease and using something that's not as aggressive as they should really use based on the amount of body surface area of disease that they have. And there's a lot of things that contribute to that. It could be that their health insurance has things in place that require their doctor to jump through a lot of hoops, things like prior authorization and step therapy practices that kind of slow patients getting onto treatments. It could be that the cost sharing for those therapies is just too high for the patient to be able to afford the part that they have to pay to receive the therapy. So at the National Psoriasis Foundation, we spent a lot of time talking to our community to really understand what those barriers are. And then once we've gained that understanding, that really becomes our policy agenda. And what we're doing both with policymakers at the state and federal level, as well as with health insurance companies, is talking through all of these issues and trying to bring forward common sense solutions that we can all agree upon to reduce these barriers, reduce these burdens, and get individuals living with psoriasis on treatment as quickly as possible. Some examples of that have been legislation that we have pushed at both the state and federal level on step therapy. So now today, I'm happy to share that 36 states have in place step therapy protections that makes it easier for a patient and a provider to work through an exception process, if that's appropriate, to get that individual on the therapy that the provider thinks is most appropriate for them. Doesn't ban step therapy or the practice of step therapy, but rather lays out 5 exceptions and a process by which patients and providers can utilize those exceptions if it makes sense for that particular patient to get on a different therapy than the one that they would normally have access to through their insurance company. That same legislation's now also been introduced at the federal level.
Very cool. And when you're doing this, is it the Psoriasis Foundation reaching out to the legislators on their own, or is it physicians with patients? How do you do it?
At the federal level, one of the ways that we have done that is by bringing providers to Capitol Hill to talk directly to policymakers about why these changes are needed. In fact, in the last 10 years, we've held 2 congressional briefings with providers local to DC to talk about these issues. Dr. Larry Green, who's a dermatologist locally in Rockville, and Dr. Evan Siegel, who's a practicing rheumatologist here, both came to the Hill with me to talk about the challenges of managing psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis. And through these two conversations, we were able to help policymakers understand why we actually needed these solutions and how they would benefit not just the psoriasis community, but so many other individuals living with different chronic diseases across the country.
I love the way you're empowering physicians to talk to legislators. I think without you, they find it very hard to bridge that gap.
Absolutely. We know that at the end of the day, it's really those individual stories of the voter back in their district who's struggling that's going to motivate a member of Congress to become involved in our advocacy work. And so a large part of what we do is trying to bring forward stories so that policymakers understand how difficult it is to live with a chronic disease and the important role that they can play in improving the health of their community. So we love to work in coalition. We believe that we are stronger when we are partnering with all of those other actors in the healthcare space. And so that does mean patients and providers and caregivers. It also means other patient advocacy organizations. So many of the challenges that I live with or other members of the psoriasis community live with are also the same challenges that people with MS or arthritis or lupus or Crohn's might live with. And so we partner with lots of other patient advocacy organizations, other physicians and physician groups, and even the pharmaceutical industry and payers are potential partners for us. And so we'll approach each of those organizations, each of those individuals, and invite them to be a part of the work that we're doing with, again, the same goal of trying to improve access and get individuals that are living with these chronic diseases on therapies as quickly as possible. We know people that are on therapy do better, have better health outcomes long term than those that don't have access to treatment. And so our goal is really to see each and every member of our community achieving their best possible health as quickly as possible.
The Psoriasis Foundation has taken a big step in educating physicians and other healthcare providers about psoriasis management. I know when I first became a psoriasis specialist 30-something years ago, the way I did was I went to New York to attend a meeting put on by the Psoriasis Foundation to educate dermatologists on the treatments that were available then. What other things are the Psoriasis Foundation doing now to educate physicians?
Yeah, it's so amazing the growth that we've had in those programs. And as you said, we've been educating patients for really the entirety of the foundation's history. But several years ago, we actually became an accredited medical education provider. And so that enabled us to both create provider programs that weren't accredited as well as CME accredited programs to serve all different types of healthcare providers. So today, I like to say that if you are someone who either lives with psoriasis or psoriatic arthritis or cares for someone that does, we have a program for you, regardless of what type of learner you are, how you like to receive your information, or what topics you're interested in. I guarantee we have a program that you would find useful. Several years ago, we started a podcast series called Sound Bites that's now created over 170 podcast episodes, both for patients as well as providers. We also do webinars and videos, in addition to those in-person programs that you talked about. A number of our in-person programs are many years old. In fact, 2023 marks the 25th anniversary of our residents meeting that we've been doing for dermatology residents to educate them about psoriasis and how they can care for their patients. But we continue to evolve our programs as well. A few years ago, we created a new series of programs around serving different populations of individuals. And I'm really excited that we're 2 years into a CDC grant right now that's enabling us to really raise awareness among both patients and providers about some of the unique challenges and issues they need to be thinking about to get our community to a place where their disease is well managed. Recently, that has included webinars on both skin of color and treating individuals of skin of color with psoriasis, as well as we also just released a webinar on serving patients who are LGBTQ. So both of those programs are available on our website, free of charge for anyone interested in watching them and learning more about this patient population.
I presume that Sound Bites begins with the letter P?
It does. You know, we love to play off the PS in psoriasis. So it's Sound Bites with a PS. That's right.
Excellent. And we should let the listeners know that if they sign up for professional membership in the Psoriasis Foundation, they'll probably get the Psoriasis Foundation's journal, the Journal of Psoriasis and Psoriatic Arthritis. We haven't even touched on psoriatic arthritis. The foundation does so much for our patients. All right, Leah, are there any other pearls you want to share with our listeners?
You know, I think the main thing that I would love your listeners to know is what a resource we are for them and their patients. We operate a patient navigation center where we serve about 17,000 individuals a year who are looking for both information related to education as well as help with accessing therapies, all free of charge in addition to the education programs we have. And I think my main message would be, please reach out or encourage your patients to reach out and take advantage of all these free resources. As we started with, there has been so much advancements in our space, and we want to see each and every member of the psoriasis community today achieve that same high optimal level of health. And those treatments that can get them there are available. And so please work with us to help you and the patient community get to that place where their disease is well managed. The MPF is here to help.
All right. So for our listeners, if you've got patients with psoriasis and you want to educate them about their options, use the Psoriasis Foundation's free resources available at psoriasis.org, not .com, psoriasis.org. If you're having issues where payers are making access difficult for your patients, partner with the foundation. And if you want to change the whole landscape and reach out to legislators, partnering with the foundation would be the way to go. Leah Howard, thank you so much for being on our program today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining our discussion with our guest, Leah McCormick Howard. We've got Drs. Nihal Mehta, Chris Richland, and Rick Freed joining us for episode 2 on comorbidities of psoriasis. So be sure to join us for that. And check out the Medscape mobile app and share, save, and subscribe if you enjoyed this episode. I'm Dr. Steve Feldman for Medscape in Discussion.
Thanks for listening to Medscape's In Discussion Psoriasis podcast series with our host, Dr. Stephen R. Feldman. Be sure to look for more In Discussion episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Check out Medscape.com or the Medscape app for show notes, links, and more information on psoriasis.